Today, I want to share my story. I want to tell you this so you can learn a lesson from it. My life was ordinary, filled with the usual ups and downs. I worked hard, loved my family, and tried to be a good person. But one day, everything changed. It started as a normal afternoon. I was driving home from work, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, its light spilling across the sky like liquid fire. The radio played softly in the background, a familiar song humming through the speakers, and I remember thinking about dinner plans. Should I stop for groceries? Maybe try that new recipe I'd been saving. The mundane thoughts of everyday life filled my mind, grounding me in the rhythm of routine. The road was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost too still, as if the world were holding its breath. I glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of my own reflection-tired eyes, a faint smile. I thought about how much I needed a good night's sleep, how I'd been pushing myself too hard lately. But those thoughts were fleeting, swept away by the gentle hum of the engine and the warmth of the setting sun on my skin. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. A truck, massive and unyielding, swerved into my lane. Time didn't just slow, it fractured. I heard the screech of tires, a sound so sharp it seemed to cut through the air like a knife. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, my body bracing instinctively, but there was no time to react. The impact was sudden, violent, a collision of metal and momentum that sent my car spinning. In that moment, everything went silent. The world around me blurred into streaks of light and shadow, like a painting smeared by a careless hand. I felt weightless, untethered, as if I were floating rather than falling. My body, so solid and real just seconds ago, now felt distant, almost irrelevant. I couldn't feel the seat beneath me or the wheel in my hands. All I could feel was a strange pulling sensation, as if something were drawing me upward. And then, I was above it all. I looked down and saw the wreckage, my car, crumpled and twisted, surrounded by flashing lights and people rushing to help. It was surreal, like watching a scene from a movie. I could see myself, slumped in the driver's seat, unmoving. But I felt no pain, no fear. Instead, there was a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing someone else's life. The air around me was different, thicker somehow, and charged with an energy I couldn't explain. It was warm, comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket on a cold day. I noticed details I shouldn't have been able to see, the way the sunlight glinted off the broken glass, the faint tremor in the hands of a paramedic as he reached for the door. Everything was sharper, more vivid, as if I were seeing the world for the first time. And then the light came. It started as a faint glow, soft and golden, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. But it grew quickly, brighter and brighter, until it filled my vision completely. I felt myself being drawn toward it, pulled by a force I couldn't resist. There was no fear, no hesitation, just an overwhelming sense of peace. As I moved closer, the light seemed to take on a life of its own. It pulsed and shimmered like a living thing, and I could feel it reaching out to me, wrapping me in its warmth. It was then that I realized this wasn't just light, it was love. Pure, unconditional love, the kind I had never known existed. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer in the world I had always known. I was somewhere else, somewhere beyond. But even as I surrendered to the light, a part of me wondered what happens next. The light grew brighter, enveloping me completely, and I felt myself moving faster, as if I were being drawn into a tunnel. It wasn't like anything I had ever experienced before. There was no wind, no sound, just a sensation of effortless motion, like gliding on a calm, invisible river. The colors around me shifted and swirled, hues I couldn't name, colors that seemed to exist beyond the spectrum of human understanding. They danced and pulsed, alive with an energy that resonated deep within me, as if they were speaking a language my soul had always known but my mind had forgotten. As I traveled, the tunnel began to widen, and I became aware of shapes forming in the light. At first, they were indistinct, like shadows cast by a flickering flame, but gradually they took on more defined forms. They weren't human, yet they felt familiar, like old friends I hadn't seen in years. Their presence was soothing, radiating a warmth that seemed to seep into every fiber of my being. One of them approached me, and though it had no face, no mouth, I felt it communicate with me not through words, but through a flood of emotions and images that filled my mind. It showed me glimpses of my life, moments I had long forgotten or buried deep within my memory. I saw myself as a child, laughing as I ran through a field of wildflowers, the sun on my face and the wind in my hair. I felt the joy of that moment, pure and untainted, as if I were living it all over again. But then the scene shifted, and I was older, standing at my grandmother's funeral. The grief was sharp, raw, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, just as it had all those years ago. Yet even in that pain, there was a thread of love, a connection that death could not sever. The being guided me through these memories, not to judge or condemn, but to help me understand. It showed me how every moment, every choice had shaped me, how the threads of my life were woven together into a tapestry far more intricate than I had ever realized. I saw the times I had been kind, the times I had been selfish, the times I had loved, and the times I had hurt. And through it all, there was a sense of compassion, a reminder that I was human, flawed and imperfect, but still worthy of love. As we moved deeper into this realm, the light began to change. It became softer, more diffuse, like the glow of a candle in a dark room. The air around me felt different, too thicker, almost tangible, as if I could reach out and touch it. I noticed that the ground beneath me, though I couldn't see it, felt solid and reassuring, like the earth after a long journey. And then I began to hear sounds gentle, melodic, like the distant hum of a choir or the rustle of leaves in a breeze. It was music, but unlike any music I had ever heard, a harmony that seemed to resonate with the very core of my being. The being beside me guided me toward a vast open space where the light seemed to gather and pool like water in a tranquil lake. In the center of this space stood a figure, radiant and serene. It was Jesus, though he looked nothing like the images I had seen in churches or books. His presence was overwhelming, not in a way that made me feel small or insignificant, but in a way that made me feel seen, known, and utterly loved. His eyes, deep and infinite, seemed to hold the entire universe within them, and yet they focused on me as if I were the only person who mattered. He didn't speak, but his thoughts flowed into mine, clear and unmistakable. He showed me the souls of those who had been cremated, their forms glowing with the same light that surrounded him. I had always wondered what happened to them, whether their choice or the choice made for them had any effect on their eternal state. What he revealed to me was both simple and profound. The body is temporary, a vessel for the soul, but the soul itself is eternal, untouched by the flames that consume the flesh. Cremation, he showed me, was just a physical process, a return to dust, but it had no power over the spirit. The souls of the cremated were just as whole, just as radiant, as those who had been buried. As I stood there, absorbing this truth, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. But there was more. Jesus showed me how every soul is connected, how our actions ripple through the lives of others in ways we can't always see. He showed me moments where a kind word or a small act of generosity had changed someone's life, and moments where a harsh word or a thoughtless action had caused pain. And through it all, he emphasized forgiveness not just for others, but for ourselves. He showed me moments where I had been too hard on myself, where I had held onto guilt and shame long after I should have let it go. Let it go, he seemed to say. You are loved beyond measure. In that moment, I felt a peace unlike anything I had ever known. It was as if every doubt, every fear, every regret had been washed away, leaving only love pure, unconditional, and eternal. And as I stood there, bathed in that light, I knew that no matter what happened next, I would carry this feeling with me, a beacon of hope and love to guide me through whatever lay ahead. The journey led me to a place that defied description, a realm of pure light and love where time and space had no meaning. It was as if I had stepped into the heart of a star, surrounded by a radiance that was both blinding and soothing, a paradox that my mind struggled to comprehend. The air, if it could even be called air, was thick with a palpable energy, like the hum of 1,000 whispered prayers. I could feel it vibrating through me, resonating with something deep within my soul, as if I were a tuning fork struck by an unseen hand. In this place, I met Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made me feel completely seen and loved. He didn't look like the paintings or statues I had seen in churches. His form was fluid, shifting between human and something far greater, as if he were both a person and the embodiment of the universe itself. His eyes were deep pools of light, filled with a wisdom that felt ancient and infinite. Yet his gaze was tender, filled with a love so profound it brought tears to my eyes, though I wasn't sure if I still had eyes to cry. He didn't speak in words, but his thoughts flowed into mine, clear and unmistakable. He showed me the souls of people who had been cremated, their forms glowing with the same light that surrounded him. I had always wondered what happened to them, whether their choice or the choice made for them had any effect on their eternal state. What he revealed to me was both simple and profound. The body is temporary, a vessel for the soul, but the soul itself is eternal, untouched by the flames that consume the flesh. Cremation, he showed me, was just a physical process, a return to dust, but it had no power over the spirit. The souls of the cremated were just as whole, just as radiant as those who had been buried. As I stood there, absorbing this truth, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. But there was more. Jesus showed me how every soul is connected, how our actions ripple through the lives of others in ways we can't always see. He showed me moments where a kind word or a small act of generosity had changed someone's life, and moments where a harsh word or a thoughtless action had caused pain. And through it all, he emphasized forgiveness not just for others, but for ourselves. He showed me moments where I had been too hard on myself, where I had held onto guilt and shame long after I should have let it go. Let it go, he seemed to say. You are loved beyond measure. In that moment, I felt a peace unlike anything I had ever known. It was as if every doubt, every fear, every regret had been washed away, leaving only love pure, unconditional, and eternal. And as I stood there, bathed in that light, I knew that no matter what happened next, I would carry this feeling with me, a beacon of hope and love, to guide me through whatever lay ahead. But Jesus wasn't finished. He showed me something else, something that took my breath away. He revealed the interconnectedness of all souls, a vast, intricate web of light that stretched across eternity. Each soul was a point of light, connected to countless others by threads of love and shared experience. I could see how every action, every thought, every word sent ripples through this web, touching lives in ways I could never have imagined. It was beautiful and humbling, a reminder of the power we each hold to affect the world around us. As I watched, Jesus pointed to a particular thread, one that glowed brighter than the others. It was my thread, my life, connected to the lives of everyone I had ever known or touched. I could see the moments where my choices had brought joy and healing, and the moments where they had caused pain. But instead of feeling guilt or shame, I felt a deep sense of understanding. Jesus showed me that even the mistakes, the moments of weakness, were part of the journey, opportunities for growth and learning. Forgive yourself, he seemed to say. You are loved, not in spite of your flaws, but because of them. The experience was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. I felt as if I were being filled to the brim with love and light, until I thought I might burst. And yet, there was no fear, no sense of being overwhelmed. Instead, there was a profound sense of peace, a knowing that everything was exactly as it should be. As I stood there, bathed in that light, I realized that I was part of something much larger than myself, a tapestry of souls woven together by love. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened next, I would carry this feeling with me, a beacon of hope and love, to guide me through whatever lay ahead. Just as I was beginning to understand the depth of his love, I felt a gentle pull, like the tug of a current in a calm river. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew stronger, more insistent. I didn't want to leave. How could I? This place, this light, this love, it was everything I had ever longed for, everything I hadn't even known I needed. But the pull was undeniable. A quiet yet firm reminder that my time here was not yet over. The figures who had guided me before reappeared, their presence soothing and reassuring. They didn't speak, but I could feel their encouragement, their understanding. Together, we began to move, not back through the tunnel of light, but along a different path, one that felt familiar yet new. The light around us shifted, softening into hues of gold and amber, like the warm glow of a sunset after a long day. The air grew cooler, though not unpleasantly so, and I noticed a faint scent, something earthy and fresh, like rain on dry soil. It was comforting, grounding, a reminder of the world I had left behind. As we traveled, the landscape around me began to change. The infinite expanse of light and love gave way to something more tangible, more structured. I could see shapes forming in the distance: trees, mountains, a horizon. It was as if I were being gently guided back to reality, step by step, moment by moment. The transition was seamless, almost effortless, but I could feel the weight of my body returning, the sensation of limbs and breath and heartbeat slowly coming back to me. It was strange, like slipping into a familiar coat after years of wearing something else. And then I heard a sound, faint at first, but growing louder. It was a rhythmic beeping, steady and insistent, like a metronome keeping time. I recognized it almost immediately. The sound of a heart monitor. My heart monitor. The realization hit me like a wave, and with it came a flood of sensations: cool sheets against my skin, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the sterile scent of antiseptic. I was in a hospital room. I opened my eyes, blinking against the brightness. The room was small, filled with machines and tubes, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. My body felt heavy, weighted down by something I couldn't quite name. I tried to move, but my limbs were sluggish, uncooperative. A wave of frustration washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by something else: relief. I was alive. I had come back. The door opened, and a nurse walked in, her face lighting up when she saw me awake. "Welcome back," she said, her voice warm and kind. She moved quickly, checking the machines, adjusting the IV, her hands steady and sure. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, but my throat was dry, my voice a mere whisper. She noticed and brought me a cup of water, holding it gently to my lips. The water was cool, soothing, and I drank greedily, feeling it revive me, grounding me further in this reality. As the nurse worked, I noticed something else, a presence, faint but unmistakable. It was the same warmth, the same love I had felt in that other realm, but softer, quieter, as if it had followed me back. I closed my eyes, focusing on it, and for a moment, I could almost see the figures who had guided me, their light still lingering at the edges of my vision. They were with me, even here, even now. The door opened again, and this time it was my family. Their faces were a mix of relief and worry, their eyes filled with tears. My husband reached for my hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and my children crowded around the bed, their voices overlapping in a chorus of questions and exclamations. I wanted to tell them everything, to share the incredible journey I had been on, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I squeezed my husband's hand, tears streaming down my face, and whispered, "I'm here, I'm back." In that moment, I realized something profound. I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to love more deeply, more fully, more intentionally. The experience had changed me, stripped away the layers of fear and doubt, leaving only what truly mattered. And as I lay there, surrounded by the people I loved, I knew that I would carry this feeling with me, a beacon of hope and love to guide me through whatever lay ahead. Since that day, my life has been different. It's not that the world around me has changed, it's still the same, with its routines and challenges, its joys and sorrows, but I see it differently now. It's as if a veil has been lifted, revealing a deeper, more vibrant reality beneath the surface. The colors seem brighter, the sounds clearer, the air itself feels charged with a kind of energy I can't quite explain. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing that the world is far more beautiful, far more alive than you ever imagined. I no longer fear death. How could I? After what I've seen, I know now that it's not an end, but a transition, a return to a love so profound it's beyond human comprehension. That knowledge has freed me in ways I never thought possible. I used to worry about so many things, what people thought of me, whether I was doing enough, whether I was enough. But now, those worries seem small, almost trivial. I've seen the bigger picture, and it's filled with light and love and infinite possibility. Forgiveness has become a cornerstone of my life, not just for others, but for myself. I used to carry so much guilt, so much shame for the mistakes I've made, the hurt I've caused. But Jesus showed me that those mistakes don't define me. They're part of my journey, opportunities for growth and learning. And so, I've learned to let go, to forgive myself and others, to embrace the imperfections that make us human. It's not always easy, old habits die hard, but I'm trying every day to live with more compassion, more grace. One of the most profound changes has been in how I see other people. I used to judge so quickly, so harshly without even realizing it, but now I see the divine in everyone I meet. It's there, in the cashier at the grocery store, the stranger on the bus, the neighbor I've never really talked to. It's in their eyes, their smiles, their stories. We're all connected, all part of the same tapestry. And that realization has made me more patient, more kind, more willing to listen and understand. I've also learned to cherish the small moments, the ones I used to take for granted. The way the sunlight filters through the trees in the morning, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The sound of my children laughing, their voices like music. The feel of my husband's hand in mine, steady and strong. These moments are gifts, precious and fleeting, and I've learned to hold them close, to savor them, to let them fill me with gratitude. But perhaps the most important lesson I've learned is the power of love. It's not just a feeling, not just an emotion, it's a force, an energy that binds us all together. It's in the kindness of a stranger, the support of a friend, the forgiveness of a loved one. It's in the way we care for each other, the way we lift each other up, the way we keep going, even when life is hard. Love is what heals us, what sustains us, what carries us through the darkest times. And so, I've made it my mission to live with more love, to be a beacon of hope and kindness in a world that so often feels dark and divided. It's not always easy. There are days when I feel tired, when the weight of the world seems too heavy to bear. But then I remember the light, the love, the peace I felt in that other realm. And I know that I can keep going, that I can make a difference, even in small ways. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. It's what binds us together, what heals us, and what carries us into eternity. Whether our bodies are buried, cremated, or lost to the sea, our souls are eternal, cherished, and loved. So forgive, love deeply, and never lose hope. Because no matter what happens in this life, there is a light waiting for us on the other side, a light that will never fade.